Welcome again. So here's what's happened in Ukraine over the last couple of hours. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says sanctions imposed on Russia are the price worth paying for freedom. He made the comments as leaders arrived in Madrid for a NATO summit today and acknowledged that most people in the West were paying higher energy prices, but that an even higher price is being paid by Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the more weapons Western countries supply to Ukraine, the longer the conflict will last. He also echoed claims by the Defense Ministry regarding Monday's attack in Kremenchuk that its forces were targeting weapons near the center, which was not in use. The UN Security Council will be meeting today to discuss attacks on civilians in Kremenchuk. A U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has described the attack as absolutely sickening and that the UN must continue to hold Russia accountable. French President Emmanuel Macron says the attack in Kremenchuk is a war crime. And finally, the Kremlin says Russia will end its offensive in Ukraine as soon as Kyiv surrenders, calling on Ukrainian authorities to order their troops to lay down arms. Government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov is quoted as saying the Ukrainian side can stop everything before the end of today. We'll show you in a minute a drone shot of the attack on the shopping mall in Kremenchuk just hours after the incident. Firefighters and soldiers still searching for survivors in the rubble. There were approximately 1,000 people inside the shopping mall when 2 Russian missiles slammed into the mall. 18 people died in the attack. 24 others were sent to hospital where they're still receiving treatment. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an overnight address, called the attack deliberate, saying it was a calculated Russian strike exactly onto the shopping center. Russia denies intentionally targeted civilians in its special military operation in Ukraine, which has destroyed cities, killed thousands of people, and driven millions from their homes. And as can be imagined, the attack on Kremenchuk shocked the residents in the city, which had until yesterday never been affected, well, directly by the Russian invasion. Those who survived the attack have been speaking about the experience. Many speak about trying to save loved ones and walking on glass. One respondent says there were about 100 customers in the shop at a time. A shopping mall is in a busy part of town. Approximately 36,000 people live within a 2-kilometer radius. It had a food court. It also had a number of stores that sold a range of goods from clothes to jewelry. Let's bring in the VOA's Anna Chernikova. She joins me now from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you. And people still shocked about the attack in Kremenchuk. It's a place that had really not been hit by the Russian invasion until now, am I right?
Good evening. Yes, you're absolutely right. People here in Ukraine also shocked, and because it was just, a horrible terroristic act. And we know about a lot of victims already.
Yeah, and let's talk about, the deliberateness, of the attack. It hit a shopping mall, and the Ukrainian president believes this was just Russia being inhumane, a war crime. The condemnation continues, for the Russian military forces and what has happened. But Russia claims it was targeting, a weapons depot close to the area. Do you have any idea, if there were even soldiers or Ukrainian forces in the area at all?
No, it was not, and it was no depot as it is. So it was just a shopping mall, a nice park zone with nice, some nature area, and a big kids playground, which was very popular with the civilians. As we hear from the civilians of Kremenchuk, a lot of children every weekend are spending time there, and every evening as well. So it was a very, normal city, let's say a city center, city mall, very popular with the civilians, and it was no military base. It was no, nothing like that. So no soldiers, nothing. It was a very precise target by Russians because we know about 2 missiles, and Really, it's really hard to believe that two missiles, and it was missiles from the bombardment planes, aircraft. So it's really difficult to imagine that it was not a target and it was, an accident. It looks like it was a precise target, and it was a shopping mall, nothing else.
You know, it contrasts with what's happening in the rest of Ukraine, where we have seen lots of rubble, buildings destroyed, almost unrecognizable when you put them side by side at the before pictures, of the before the Russian invasion, and you're looking at them now. Kremenchuk just seems like, one of those untouched places in Ukraine. And now that it's been hit by Russian missiles, how are the people reacting to this? I know we had some of them who said, they were shocked about it. Some tried to save loved ones. We've seen pictures of them putting flowers, close to the site where the attack happened. But in general, what's the feeling like today in Ukraine?
I think that the feeling is in Kremenchuk today is similar to the feeling of those who stay now in Lviv, in Ivano-Frankivsk, which is west, in Kyiv as well, because people are trying to get back to normal despite, this, of course, terrible environment, because war is happening and war, unfortunately, is affecting every region of Ukraine. But still, as you can imagine, people who live in the east, they feel this war, in their everyday life much closer and much more than people in Kyiv and Lviv or in Kremenchuk, for instance. Yes. So people just reminded again that the war is going on, and the war is very close. It doesn't matter if you are located in the east, in the west, in the north, or in the south, or in the central part of Ukraine. Unfortunately, Russian forces are intensifying their attacks, especially missile attacks, and they use more and more aircraft for missile launches, and they use, wider territory for as a target. And unfortunately, as we can see for the past couple of days, civilian areas and residential buildings are the target. So people just, are reminded again that war is very close, and government is reminding people again as well that everyone should be very careful with air raid sirens and should be attentive when air raid siren is on.
Now, apart from Russia denying, the reason why Kremenchuk was attacked, the Russian government, the Kremlin, today said this war can end if Ukraine surrenders. Have there been reactions to that?
We don't have official reaction yet. I guess it should come in the evening. I think it will come. But I can say that it is internal reaction, of course. And Ukraine already stated this, and Ukrainian government as well stated this for a lot of times already, that Ukraine will not surrender, and it's not an option, because this is probably what Russia wants, and this is probably why Russia started this war, because they thought that Ukraine would surrender in 2 days, but Ukraine has already proven that for almost 4 months now that the war is going on, that Ukraine doesn't have a plan to surrender, because this is not, this is no future then for Ukraine. So, of course, Russian side would, continue to suggest this, because this is something that they would probably want to happen, because they can feel that their forces are getting, less and less, and it's more and more difficult for their forces to advance in Ukraine. So, and this is also one of the reasons why they start to target civilian areas and residential buildings, because they just want, to create this terror effect. So people would probably, as they think, get afraid, get scared, and will, consider surrounding as an option. But this works other way around. People here in Ukraine react completely different to what's happening, and these attacks just create even more desire from the Ukrainian side to fight and to end this war with a victory, because everyone understands that if Ukraine is not winning now, then this could happen again, and this will happen again in a couple of years, or 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter.
So there are two meetings that are supposed to be taking place today. The UN Security Council is supposed to be meeting today over Ukraine, over the war in Ukraine, and condemning Russia's actions. And then there's the NATO summit that's holding in Madrid. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the West is paying the price for freedom. Do Ukrainians feel that freedom is close? Do they see that in the horizon, or do they feel it?
They feel it, especially when you talk to people, to the military and to people who are at the front line. They feel it. People in general around Ukraine, civilians, also feel it, because, every day of fighting is considered here as day closer to this final freedom, because Ukraine, if you look at the history, Ukraine is fighting for its freedom and independence for a very long, and this war is not happening 4 months, it's happening 8 years and 4 months. So people and people understand that this so now since February 24, it's an active phase of this war. And, normally such active phases are actually happening at the final stage of the war. So, and this is what the feeling here inside. And definitely, with every person, either civilian or military, who died after Russian attack, this feeling of getting peace is getting closer. And I should say that, people just don't consider any other option.
Well, they have nowhere else to go except to go forward, isn't it? How do Ukrainians feel, about the war and how long it's gone on? This is its 4th month, you rightly pointed out. And, according to the NATO Secretary General a few weeks ago, this war could continue until the end of the year.
Yeah, Ukraine also has this feeling that it will be a long war, and at least until the end of the year, it will go on. Today, Ukraine, not probably celebrates, but marks the Day of Constitution. And this is also very symbolic to talk about this today, because, a part of this of our constitution is the Ukrainian constitution is the territorial lines and territorial rights, which are in the constitution. So for Ukraine, of course, this war should end with total, with total constitutional rights back, and territorial in particular. So people just getting ready for long-term fighting. But again, when we talk about long-term, of course, it's no desire to get it to a couple of years or 5 years or 10 years. Of course, everyone hopes that this would happen soon, but there is belief that it's not going to end until the end of the year, and people are getting ready. Both emotionally and physically, and people here also believe that with more weapons coming from the West, and we also see that this long distance, long range weapons are just coming now. So everyone are expecting that this would change the situation at the front line, and by the end of the year, Ukraine should have enough of amount of this weapon, at least in this point of time. So this is a kind of expectation here.
Anna, I appreciate your reporting. Stay safe in Kyiv, and do keep your hopes up.
Thank you.
I mentioned the NATO summit earlier. Finnish President Sauli Niinisto says it's difficult to predict the outcome of negotiations with Turkey ahead of a meeting with President Recep Erdogan in Madrid. He says he is neither optimistic nor pessimistic, as leaders of Finland and Sweden will be in the Spanish capital for the summit. Breaking with decades of a policy of neutrality, Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Their application was warmly welcomed as a historic moment by alliance chiefs, but they have faced opposition from Turkey over what it says is the Nordic country's support for militants it views as terrorists and arms embargoes on Ankara. President Tayyip Erdogan held firm on his stance towards Finland and Sweden's NATO bids today, saying Turkey wants results, not words, to address its concerns.
I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic. I just want to have a very open, clear, straightforward going discussion with him. And it's good that we have a possibility to do that. Let's see what we can achieve. But it is quite difficult to predict the results.
Meanwhile, Kurds in Sweden's large diaspora are worried they will become a pawn in the negotiations over Stockholm's ambition to join NATO if the West makes concessions to win Turkish support. Sweden, alongside Finland, applied for the NATO membership in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with their bids warmly welcomed. But they faced opposition from Turkey, which we have mentioned and emphasized severally on this program, which has been angered by what it says is the support for Kurdish militants and arms controls in Ankara over 2019 incursion into Syria. Any bid to join NATO, which holds a 3-day summit this week, requires backing from each of its 30 members. Turkey has been a NATO ally for over 70 years. Sweden's 100,000-strong Kurdish diaspora and Stockholm's support for Kurds' rights has long been points of friction in relations with Ankara. The Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK, has been waging an insurgency in Turkey since 1984, in which more than 40,000 people have been killed. Sweden has long outlawed the PKK and says it only provides humanitarian aid to Syria and refugees in the region, mainly through international organizations.
The economical and political situation in Turkey is very bad. He has not the support he wants to have. The economical situation is the Turkish, for example, lira is very, very down. I mean, it had been not like that in past 15, 20 years. It is dangerous. And he also knows that the EU and Biden and many countries, they are not agree with him. And that is why he used Sweden, he used the Kurds, he used the refugees to come home to the warm, to be hacked of Biden and the United States.
Welcome back. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says poverty and desperation led to the deaths of at least 50 migrants abandoned in a lorry in San Antonio, Texas. Among the dead were Mexicans, Guatemalans, Hondurans. Those found alive, some of them children, were taken to hospital. President Obrador blamed trafficking and a lack of control at the border for the situation as well.
The discovery was made on Monday and is considered to be one of the most deadly recent incidents in human smuggling along the U.S.-Mexico border. The truck was found next to railroad tracks in a remote area on the city's southern outskirts. There have been a record number of migrant crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border in recent months, which has sparked criticisms of the immigration policies of U.S. President Joe Biden.
Approximately 6 this evening, San Antonio Fire Department responded to 9600 Quintana Road for a report of a dead person. Engine 52 arrived and found the trailer, as Chief McManus mentioned, with a body outside and several that they could visibly see inside once the doors were opened. At this time, we have processed approximately 46 bodies that have been triaged and tagged and declared deceased at this time. Fortunately, we were able to transport 16 people. 12 of those are adults and 4 pediatric. All of them were conscious at the time upon transportation.
According to officials, the survivors were hot to the touch and suffering from heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Temperatures in San Antonio, which is about 250 kilometers from the Mexican border, swelled to a high of 39.4 degrees Celsius on Monday. The city's police chief, William McManus, says a person who works in a nearby building heard a cry for help and came out to investigate. The worker found the trailer doors partially opened and looked inside and found a number of dead bodies.
So the first call came in at about 10 minutes to 6 this afternoon. A worker who works in one of the buildings up here behind me heard a cry for help, came out to investigate, found the trailer with the doors partially open, opened them up to take a look, and found a number of deceased individuals inside. So we have 3 people in custody. We don't know if they are absolutely connected to this or not. This investigation has been turned over to HSI. It is now a federal investigation.
Mexican Consul General Ruben Minuti has been dispatched to the scene, and the consulate in San Antonio says it will provide all the support if Mexican citizens are among the dead. It will not be the first time such an incident has happened in the United States. Back in 2017, 10 immigrants were found dead in a similar tractor trailer outside a Walmart, also on the city's south side.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, do situate the area where this incident happened. We know it's close to the Mexican border.
Yes, as you mentioned, the area is very close to the Mexico border. It's a very kind of desolate area. As you can see just from some of the video footage, there's a lot of farm area near there, just about 2-lane roads. And so it's a very isolated area where these individuals were found. This was not a major part of town. And so we do know that this has been a major concern for many in recent times, especially since the Title 42 policy has been put in place since the coronavirus. And so we've seen, unfortunately, an escalation of deportations back from the U.S. To Mexico and other countries in Central America. And we know that this is really related to what we have seen with the pandemic and not being able to really control the borders, because many individuals honestly are escaping other areas because of an increase of health crises. And as we know anyway, the U.S. has had a long-standing migrant population from right there at the border.
And, well, it's clear, you know, finding that truck on the road, it was probably coming into the United States. But is it common, you know, for migrants to be transported like these, in trucks like this?
Yes, unfortunately, it's extremely common for this type of transport to happen. You hear each and every day that so many of those who migrate to the U.S., unfortunately, illegally because of some of the restrictions around being able to easily access entry to the U.S. from the border, they come in through the tractors. They come in. We know that there are underground tunnels that exist. There's a variety of very unsafe circumstances that many individuals find to be able to cross into the U.S. in hopes that they will make it, in hopes that they will make it alive. And we see here the unfortunate circumstance where we have 50 individuals that did not make it to where they were hoping to.
And authorities say that the migrants died from heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Any word on perhaps who the driver was and then why he stopped right in the middle of the road where the truck was found?
It's, as I stated before, it's a federal investigation. At this time, there are 3 individuals who are in custody that have been arrested that will obviously be questioned, and they'll get further details as to why it was in the middle of the road, as you said, which is very uncommon, and it would make you a very high target for being stopped. As you said before, this is an area where there is a lot of crossings. That's the illegal crossing, and so that is not necessarily an area where one would want to just stop. And so I know in the coming days, once the federal investigation continues forward, we will find out more. But at this time, obviously, most things are very closed just due to ensure the integrity of the investigation. They're able to really get to the bottom of how this happened and to potentially begin to look at some immigration reform that will allow for safety at the border.
The White House has reacted to this incident, describing the deaths as horrific and heartbreaking. So what are the efforts that they're making to control the situation at the border with Mexico?
Well, there's been a long call for being able to address the policies that were put in place during the coronavirus as it relates to immigration between the U.S.-Mexico majority and obviously those who are crossing in from Mexico from other places right there at the border. And so that policy, Title 42, is definitely going to be underway, and I'm sure Congress is going to bring it up as one that needs to be reviewed. The White House is likely going to review that. They're probably going to be putting in additional measures right there at the border with those military individuals and personnel that are there, Homeland Security personnel, to secure the border. But we know that there has been about 12 to 16 months now, there was thoughts that we would have a great increase in migration, illegal migration at the border, and we have seen that. And a lot of this is due to economic flights that resulting from the pandemic and obviously the health crisis.
Maria, we've heard from the Mexican president who's, talked about Mexicans who might have been involved, who might have died, in this unfortunate incident. But there's a possibility there were also Guatemalans and Hondurans. Have their leaders said anything about what has happened?
Yes, I mean, there has been very minimal conversations around that. We know that many of the Central America, as you mentioned, Honduras, Mexico, are obviously very much a part of the conversation, working with White House officials to be able to come to some sort of understanding as to exactly what has occurred and how they can support. And obviously, one of the concerns is going to be, how they're going to address some of this illegal immigration into the U.S., especially now that we know the death rates. You talk about 50 individuals dying at the hands of heat strokes and heat exhaustion. Something has to be done between the countries to be able to address this from a greater standpoint.
Are Americans outraged at all?
Americans obviously are. There are those who are supporting a relaxing of some of the immigration rules and policies. There are many that are very upset about the detention centers that exist. When we look at the issues around families being separated at the border, understanding why people are coming here with refugee status, there are many of those who are very outraged about the way in which immigration policies are in place here in the U.S. And then you have those who are a bit concerned that we're not being strict enough on it. So it just depends on where you sit on the political spectrum. Those who are supporters of former President Trump are obviously going to want stricter immigration policies. But many liberal Democrats are looking to say that President Biden needs to do more, and we need to relax some of the policies and put measures in place to ensure that safety as a human rights issue.
Maria, thanks again for joining us. We're still in the United States. 3 people have been killed after an Amtrak train carrying more than 200 passengers derailed in northern Missouri after hitting a dump truck at an uncontrolled crossing, killing 2 aboard and a person in the truck and injuring 50 others. 8 cars and 2 locomotives derailed. Amtrak reported this, leaving all but 1 car lying on its side along the track surrounded by grass and farmland near the rural town of Mendon. Mendon is a rural area about 100 miles northeast of Kansas City, Missouri. Public Information Officer for the Missouri State Highway Patrol, Justin Dunn, gave an update on the situation.
Is at approximately 12:43 p.m. today, the Sheraton County 911 Center received a 911 call of a vehicle struck by a train on Porsche Prairie Avenue in Sheraton County, southwest of Minden, Missouri. At approximately 13:02, first responders began to arrive on the scene. Preliminary investigation indicates an Amtrak passenger train traveling to Chicago, Illinois, struck a dump truck at the railroad crossing of Porsche Prairie Avenue. It's an uncontrolled crossing. The train had approximately 8 cars, including a baggage car. 7 cars have derailed. There are multiple injuries, and we can confirm there are 3 fatalities, 2 on the train and 1 in the dump truck. Personnel are currently working to secure the scene. The train had approximately 207 passengers, as well as crew members. All injured and uninjured occupants of the train have been transported from the scene. Multiple law enforcement agencies, ambulance districts, first responders, fire departments, and medical helicopters responded to assist.
Cameroonian authorities say at least 30 people have been killed following clashes over land between neighboring communities in the southwest region. A spokesperson for the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon said the fight between the Oliti and Mesage Ekol groups in Akwaya was very violent. A church released pictures that showed dead bodies lying on the ground. Violence started when attackers stormed a funeral ceremony in the village of Bakinjo on Saturday and continued on Sunday, according to the communications officer of Akwaya District, Okumo Angwa. He says people were burnt in their homes while others were beheaded in the attack. Well, June 20 every year is recognized as World Refugee Day. This year, however, the UN agency in charge of refugees in Nigeria marked the day in Lagos a week later for a very special reason, and that's because the Lagos State Governor would be signing the cities with Refugees Declaration. Here in this hall are men and women who play impactful roles in providing for a fraction of the over 30 million refugees in the world, residents in Nigeria, and making them feel safe and wanted. The Honorable Federal Commissioner of National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons informs on efforts made by the Commission in this regard.
We'll continue to strengthen our response towards refugees and persons of concerns. Recently, our Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajja Sadia Omar Farouk, approved for the infusion of persons of concerns into the National Social Investment Program, the JIP, the N-Power, and also the N-Skills. And we'll continue to intervene, partnering with the whole of society.
Head of UNHCR in Nigeria follows closely with her message on the agency's work, which supports that of the NCFRMI.
And create protective environments for refugees. The role of cities and towns and countries in creating inclusive communities and promoting hope for people forced to flee their homes has never been more important. Local authorities and other local actors in urban and rural settings, including local community leaders, traditional community governance institutions, are often the first responders to refugee situations.
Following several speeches from different governments and international agencies, the guest speaker, Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, Professor Mohammed Taufik Ladan, takes a surgical look into the reason refugees exist, why they're not the problem, and why everyone in Africa may be a potential refugee.
The people forced to flee are not the problem, because I am always having this troubling perception. When people see the statistics, Your Excellency, everybody thinks that the refugees and asylum seekers are the problem. But I want us to have another reflection. Are the people forced to flee, are they the problem, creating global crisis? How can people being forced to flee be the problem? The refugees are not the problem, Your Excellency, in the distinguished audience. The problem rather has to do with the causes for the fleeing.
The Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, leverages on the presentation of the guest speaker to emphasize how every Nigerian carries the solution to the problem of refugees and internally displaced persons.
We here are the problem, including myself. We, the senators, your leaders, your community heads, who refuse to agree to whatever form of disputes might occur, because indeed there will be dispute, there will be disagreement. But normally what should happen is that in whatever form of disagreement, we must be able to resolve them. Because indeed not resolving them leads to issues of war, strife, and we can see all of the displacement. And so people that are seeking, those refuge are not the problem, but we that are in position, that we need to listen to ourselves, understand, that we're the same coin, we're probably just seeing the coin from different sides.
He then puts pen to a very important document, the Cities with Refugees Declaration, in 3 copies.
We all need somebody to lean on.
And with that, Lagos becomes the 282nd city with refugees in the world. There are plans to sign up more Nigerian cities in the near future as focus continues on this year's theme for the World Refugee Day, Right to Seek Safety. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News. Our heads of Libya's 2 rival legislative chambers met in Geneva today for negotiations aimed at restoring a UN-led election process that fell apart last December. Agreement on national elections would represent a big step towards stopping another bout of warfare and helping to end a decade of chaos and conflict since the NATO-backed ousting of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Both bodies are recognized under the UN-approved 2015 Libyan political agreement as the 2 legislative bodies, but they have been in direct confrontation with each other for most of the period since Libya split between eastern and western factions in 2014. Parliament Speaker Aguila Saleh and High State Council head Khalid al-Mishri arrived at the UN Geneva office this morning and sat stiffly, separated by the United Nations Libya advisor Stephanie Williams. Agreement on how to hold an election will be resolved, would help resolve a standoff over control of government that has renewed splits between rival factions involved in the last major bout of conflict that paused 2 years ago. There's currently no agreement on how to move the political process forward and who should rule the country in the lead up to the elections, with one government in the capital, Tripoli, and a rival backed by the parliament in the coastal town of Sirte. A German court has sentenced a former SS guard, now 101 years old, to 5 years in prison for assisting in the murder of some 3,500 people at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, bringing to an end one of the last Nazi trials in Germany. Prosecutors said that Joseph S., a member of the Nazi Party's paramilitary SS, helped to send 3,518 people to their deaths at the Sachsenhausen camp north of Berlin by regularly standing guard in the watchtower between 1942 and 1945. Sachsenhausen housed mainly political prisoners from across Europe, along with Soviet prisoners of war and some Jews. Some people interned in Sachsenhausen were murdered with Zyklon B, the poison gas also used in other extermination camps, where millions of Jews were killed during the Holocaust. A trial took nearly 9 months, as doctors had said the man, whose full name was not disclosed due to German trial reporting rules, was only partially fit to stand trial, and sessions were limited to 2.5 hours a day. Let's check in with the G7 summit ending today in Germany. Canada says it's ready to scale up rapidly troops it currently has in Latvia as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence. Speaking at the end of the summit, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country is committed to making sure to stand up against Russian threats and Russian posturing. Asked about Germany's progress to ramp up liquefied natural gas imports as it moves away from piped Russian supply, Mr. Trudeau told reporters there are many conversations going on with Chancellor Scholz. He looks forward to continue them when he comes to Canada in August. And Germany has rented 4 floating storage and regasification units and chose the North Sea port of Wilhelmshaven as the first handling hub.
We have been working closely with NATO partners, with the Secretary General of NATO, and especially with the Latvians, where Canada leads the enhanced forward presence and is committed to making sure we continue to stand up against Russian threats and Russian posturing, and quite frankly, Russian actions in Eastern Europe. We, like others, are developing plans to be able to scale up rapidly, and those are conversations that I very much look forward to having over the next couple of days in NATO. The response that we are taking to Russia's illegal actions is measured and proportional, and we are not looking at being provocative. We are looking at ensuring that Russia knows we will be there to defend democracies and the values that underpin them as necessary. If and when President Zelensky and the Ukrainians decide it's time to negotiate or move forward to resolving, to ensure that Russia faces defeat in Ukraine, they need to be able to negotiate from a position of force, and that's why a position of strength, and that's why we are continuing to be there with humanitarian assistance, with significant financial assistance, including what we announced today, so that the government can continue to function, and also significant military assistance so that they can continue to hold strong against this illegal Russian invasion.
As for the French President Emmanuel Macron, Russia cannot and should not win the war in Ukraine. Speaking after meeting with leaders of the group of 7 countries in Schloss-Elmau, President Macron said the Russia strike this week on a shopping mall in Kremenchuk was a war crime, and that France would keep supporting Ukraine for as long as necessary. Firefighters and soldiers are still searching for survivors in the rubble at the mall, where authorities say that 36 people are still missing after the Russian missile struck yesterday, killing at least 18 people. Western sanctions against Russia will only end when Russian President Vladimir Putin accepts that his plans in Ukraine will not succeed. Not my words, but the German Chancellor's Olaf Scholz. He says there's only one way out: for Putin to accept that his plans in Ukraine will not succeed. In the meantime, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he did not think Britain would end up at war with Russia. Asked if Britain was preparing for war, he told reporters at the G7 summit he does not think it will come to that, and G7 is working very hard to confine this to Ukraine. Also adding that UK defence spending would have to respond to the way the threats change.
I don't think it will come to that, and clearly we're working very hard to make sure that we confine this to Ukraine. I think that Putin and the Kremlin are going to try to widen the conflict and to try to say that this is something to do between NATO and Russia. That's not it at all. Now, when it comes to UK defence spending, clearly we have to respond to the way the threats continue to change. But don't forget, Dominic, that when we've now got a defence budget that's £24 billion bigger under the spending review, the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Well, of course, the news broke as we were all in the G7 sessions, and you could feel the whole mood of the meeting become yet more somber. I think people are just shocked by what Putin is capable of doing. And, you know, if anything, it helped those of us who are making the case for helping to protect the Ukrainians to get that message across to some of those people who are more swing voters in the argument. They can see that this is utter barbarism. Of course, we'll see what she has to say, and you know, look forward to that. I think the important point to make is that you know, we think the #1 priority for the country is the economic pressures, the spikes in the cost of energy. Our plan for a stronger economy certainly means that we think that we're stronger working together, but we have good relations with the Scottish Government. We'll see what she has to say.
Extreme weather events from scorching heat waves to unusually heavy downpours have caused widespread upheaval across the globe this year, with thousands of people killed and millions more displaced. Now, in the last 3 months, monsoon rains unleashed disastrous flooding in Bangladesh and brutal heat waves seared parts of South Asia and Europe. Meanwhile, prolonged drought has left millions on the brink of famine in East Africa. Much of this, scientists say, is what's expected from climate change. Today, a team of climate scientists published a study in the journal Environmental Research. Climate, the researchers scrutinized the role climate change has played in individual weather events over the past 2 decades. Their findings confirm warnings of how global warming will change our world and also make clear what information is missing.
So attribution science, and particularly with respect to weather events, is basically bringing cause and effect together. So what we're doing with attribution science is to answer the question whether and to what extent human-induced climate change is a cause of the weather event that we have just experienced. And I deliberately say a cause because it's never just no extreme weather event has one cause. There are always many different causal factors, and in attribution, we disentangle these different causes that lead to extreme weather and identify the role of climate change.
Know that pretty much all heat waves across the world have been made more intense and more likely by climate change. And we know from looking at the impact of these, particularly in places like Europe where we've got good data, this has a serious impact on people's health. And it also causes kind of economic disruption because people struggle to focus, people working outdoors can't work as effectively during heat.
Well, we'll be looking very soon at what is not a carnival in Rio de Janeiro, although that is what is to be expected. But in the Samba Dromo area, it's the Amazon's Boi-Bumba festival in the Brazilian Amazon, celebrating the color, music and tradition of its folklore after a 2-year pandemic. There it is. The Amazonian city of Parintins hosted its 55th folkloric festival, a yearly festivity that celebrates a local legend about a resurrected ox with a contest between 2 teams, Garantido and Caprichoso, it's red and blue, at the cultural center of Parintins, the Mumbudromo. You understand why this is a tongue twister. The Mumbudromo on the Tupinambana Island. 3 days each team has to outdo the other with colored, feathered and rhythmic performances such as what we're watching here, equipped with floats to bring life to Amazonian themes and legends. Garantido presented the theme Amazon of the Red People, while Caprichoso's last act featured the sub-theme Amazon, a struggle in poetry. After the 2-year pandemic break, the Amazonas state government granted 5 million reais, that's over $900,000 per team. Culture and Creative Economy Secretary Marcos Apollo Muniz said he felt satisfied seeing the number of visitors and the expected resources at the festival would leave in the region. If you know the Brazilians, they take festivals and carnivals really seriously. What a blast of color there at the Amazonas. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubari.